Hey everybody, and welcome back to another lecture with Coding with Roby. And in this lecture, we're going to be going over functions. Now, functions are a way for us to be able to isolate code and only be able to do certain aspects of code when we want that functionality to be called. We've already been using functions, and you may not know that you have. We've been using the print function. So let's start by typing in print, hello, and welcome to functions. If we save this and run this application, we get to our terminal, hello, and welcome to functions. However, print is an actual function that Python allows us to use. So if you hold down Control and you click print, it'll bring us to our builtins.py file where we have a bunch of pre-built functions already provided from Python. However, in here we can see that print has def before, it has parentheses with some information inside, a colon, and then under the colon it has some more information. We can do this exact same process to create our own functions within Python. Let's start by saying def my underscore function, two parentheses, colon, and then under here I'm going to say print inside my function. If we run the application, nothing will happen. And that's because print inside my function is inside my function, which is the function that we created. To be able to call a function, right underneath, I'm going to say my function parentheses. And if we run the application now, we're going to get inside my function. And the reason this is happening is we have a function created, and then we're calling that function. And def means define, so we're defining a function. We're naming this function my function. These parentheses are considered parameters, and we can pass in parameters that we can use inside our function. But since we are not accepting any parameters for my function, we're not passing in any parameters in my function. And when my function is called, we print inside my function. So let's create another function. And this time, I'm going to name this function print my name. And print my name is going to have a parameter called name. And inside, I'm going to say print hello my name. We can then call print my name by typing in print my name and then passing in a string as the parameter. If we run the application, we'll see that we get hello Eric. And the reason being, we are calling the function print my name, passing Eric as the parameter, which calls the function print my name with Eric as the parameter, and then we print hello Eric because Eric is getting passed in. We can also add more than one parameter. So we can make print my name have first name and last name. And then we're going to pass in our parameters to our print method. So hello, first name, and last name. And then within the function, we're going to say print my name, and we're going to pass in Steve and Jobs, which will be the parameters for first name and last name. So I have print my name with the first name and last name that prints hello, first name, last name of whatever characters and strings we pass in. I call the function of print my name and I'm passing in Steve Jobs as the two parameters. If we run the application, we'll see that we get hello Steve Jobs. Now there is something called scope. And scope is a way for us to define global variables versus internal variables. And internal variables are also known as local variables. And these internal variables are present only to the function, while global variables are accessible by the entire application. So I'm going to create a new function called printColorRed, which is going to take no parameters, and I'm just going to create a variable which is called color, which is equal to red, and then print the color. If we run printColorRed, we'll see that we get red as the response. However, what if we created another variable right above printColorRed and made that variable called color, which is equal to blue? And then right under color equals blue, I'm going to print color. From the look of it, we can see that we have a printColorRed with a variable color, which is equal to red, print color, and then we have color, which is equal to blue, print color, and then we call this function of printColorRed. If we run the application, we get blue and red, and that's because color is equal to blue, and then we print blue, while this color is an internal variable only accessible by the printColorRed, and color equals blue is accessible everywhere in the application because it's a global variable that's accessible outside of the function. Let's now create another function called printNumbers. And this is going to take in two variables, highest number and lowest number. And I'm just going to print the highest number, and then I'm going to print the lowest number. Now let's call printNumbers, and I'm going to pass in 10 and 3. If we save the application and run it, we'll see that we get 10 and 3, and that's because we're calling printNumbers, and we're passing in 10 and 3, which is highest number and lowest number. However, if we switch these numbers and make it 3 and 10, and we run the application, this could get confusing because 3 is getting passed in as highest number, and 10 is getting passed in as lowest number. Now, it doesn't actually affect the function at all, but it could make it very confusing for the programmer. So we can be explicit with the way we pass in parameters. We can, in front of the 3, say lowest number equals 3 and highest number equals 10. Now if we run the application, they will switch back to 10 and 3 because we're explicitly saying the highest number is equal to 10 while the lowest number is equal to 3. Alright, and now let's create another function called multiplyNumbers. Which takes in two parameters, a and b. And before we've been printing everything, let's now say return a times b. Now when we call the function, we're going to be returning a number instead of printing a number. And now return just means after this function executes, return whatever we want it to return, and typically we can assign that to a variable. So I'm going to say solution equals multiplyNumbers 10 and 6, and then I'm going to print the solution. When I save this and run the application, we're going to get 60 as the response. And that's because we're saying here's a new variable called solution, which is going to be equal to whatever this function of multiplyNumbers returns based on these parameters. And then we're just printing the solution. And we can also print lists and do a whole bunch of different types of calculation. So now I'm going to say def print list. The parameter is going to be list of numbers. For x in list of numbers, print x. And I'm going to create a new variable, numbers list, which is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I'm just going to print list of the number list. When I save and run the application, We're going to get 60 because that's going to refer to our solution variable in multiply numbers function. And then we're going to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 because that's our number list going through a loop in our print list function. And now we can also have functions call other functions. And you might already be thinking that because in a lot of these functions we already have our print function getting called. But let's create our own two functions that call each other. Let's create a new function called byItem, which takes in a parameter of cost of item, which returns cost of item plus add tax to item cost of item. And that add tax to item is going to be another function, which is called add tax to item, which takes in a parameter of cost of item, which returns the cost of item times the current tax rate of 0.03. And now let's create a new variable called final cost, which is equal to byItem 50. And then let's print final cost. All right, let's run this application. And we can see that we get 51.5 as the response. And what we're doing here is we have a new variable called final cost, which is equal to byItem, which is byItem, and we're passing in 50 as the parameter. And we're saying return back to final cost, whatever cost of item is, which is 50, plus add tax to item, which also takes in the cost of item, which is 50. So before we return byItem, we first need to call the add tax to item function, which also takes 50. We find that there's a variable inside add tax to item, which is equal to 0.03, where we return cost of item times current tax rate. And then once this returns, we then do cost of item plus whatever this add to tax to item returned. We assign this value to final cost, and then finally print final cost. Now I know I just overloaded you with a bunch of function information, and I'm sure it'll make more sense as we dive into more and more code. But for now, this wraps up Python functions, and I will see you in the next video.